No, you're right. Okay. It's interesting. Some people have gone to lying down on their back, and others, I think, are a little wiser and in sitting, thinking that it's easier to transition onto their hands and knees. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to come on to your knees. And this time your arm position is different. So instead of having your forearms on the floor, you're going to have your arms in a push-up position. And you're going to start with the right side of your face on the floor. So the right ear is on the floor. So before we start doing the actual movements, begin to sense where you've placed your head. So I've got the right cheek on the floor, your arms in a push-up position. And just explore or play a little bit with moving your head right and left. So if you think of the work you did in prone, and even when Julie was demonstrating with Alison, you know, you can think if your head is in the midline, is that the most comfortable place for you to start exploring some movement, or is it a little more comfortable if your head's a bit more to the left or to the right? And as you go on, you can also incorporate that into the movements. And when you found a comfortable place for your right side of your face, begin to roll your pelvis forward and back. So again, you're changing the contact along the right cheek from the forehead to the chin. But I mean, it's similar but different to what you did earlier, with the main difference being how you've got your arms and if you've accommodated your head in a different place. But as you do the movement, notice your two shoulders. So before, in the previous lesson, you had your forearms on the floor, which caused the shoulder girdle in that middle part of your back. It only gave it certain opportunities to be involved in the movement. So now as you do this movement, feel, what happens in your sternum, if your shoulders, if they're very similar, or if you're taking the weight equally on both of your hands. And you can also think of what you learned from the previous lesson about your knee position and where your knees can provide a foundation that you can move across that's going to assist you with the movement. And you can just sense your spine moving, and the spine's a bit like the transmitter from your pelvis up to your head. And then just rest back maybe on your heels. And return to the same position with your arms in a push-ups position and you're on your knees, but this time you've got the left side of your face on the floor. And again, you can do some preliminary explorations of where left and right, sort of how you translate your head, and if there's a place that allows the left side of your face to come more easily to the floor. And also you can explore, position of your arms where they provide you with support for that to happen. And then begin again to shift the pressure on your face from your chin up towards the forehead and back. And feel what happens in your spine and how you can, how you're breathing. And how can you create for yourself an environment where you can learn and sense these movements? And how different is it doing this movement with your arms in a push-up position? Now, what has it allowed the shoulder blades to do and the chest to do? And then take a rest. So in this lesson, there's going to be a lot of doing the movement with one side of your face on the floor and then with the other side of your face on the floor. Which again, if you think of strategies of learning, it's a nice strategy because you can feel how you organize yourself with, say, the right cheek on the floor and then the left. So return to the same position that you were in with your knees on the floor, your arms in a push-ups position. And this time your right ear is going to come to the floor. And feel if it's becoming easier for you to know where to place the right side of your face, or if that still needs further refinement or exploration. And now explore the movement of shifting the weight from the right ear towards the nose, so across the cheek, and having the idea that you could look towards the ceiling, so that you could roll your head and sense the shift in your shoulders and hips. So sense how one shoulder comes further up towards the ceiling as the other shoulder might lower down. And in a similar fashion, you can notice what you do with your hips and actively use your eyes in the movement. So, really coordinate the movement of the eyes with the head and feel how you can look with the eyes towards the ceiling as the head is rolling, so the back of the head is moving more toward the floor. And continue the same movement, but now change what you do with your eyes. So now instead of the eyes and head moving together, think of the eyes moving in the opposite direction of the head. And what does that do to the movement of the head? Is it possible to do this sort of differentiation, or does it, take, or do you get a little bit stuck in it Or is it just unfamiliar? Because it's always, intriguing, how much our eyes are involved in movement and in scanning our environment. And then do a few movements of the eyes with the head. So then return to moving the eyes with the head and see if that differentiation of the eyes and the head, did that somehow free things up? And again, you can explore where you place your arms, or if you want something under your head for support. And then leave it and roll onto your backs and take a pause. So it was interesting when I was going through these lessons, because I was thinking, there's, I think, 7 lessons in this series. And I saw in the lesson I taught this morning, and now this lesson, there are certain similarities, but there's also quite profound differences. And one of those big differences is the placement of the arms, and how that affects what's happening throughout your system. So return to that same position and repeat what you did this time with your left ear on the floor. So you can very much see we're going from one side to the other side. And again, think of where you place your head, and you can think of the ATMs that we did in prone, if you found a place to have your head more comfortable, if it was off the midline. And start here looking toward the ceiling and rolling your head left and right, and feeling here what happens both in your hips, how you shift the weight from one knee to the other. And also as you look toward the ceiling, can you feel how one shoulder can move more up toward the ceiling as the other shoulder moves towards the floor? So as you're looking up, you can get the sense of the right shoulder blade and shoulder moving upward as the left shoulder is moving more toward the ground. And if by doing that, does that assist you with the movement? And notice how your eyes are moving with your head. And then change the relationship of your eyes and head. So now the eyes and the head are moving in opposites. And when you've done a number of movements of the eyes and head moving in opposite directions, return to have the eyes and head moving together. And again, just observe what's changed. And also be aware of where you place your hands in a push-ups position, because like with the knees that we did in the previous lesson, explore maybe different places as we go through of where the hands might provide you with more support or allow the shoulder girdle to move more freely. And then take another, trying to think of another word than rest. Find a different position to lie in and sense the effect of the movement. So roll onto your back and just notice. And notice, how is this different to what we did earlier, where we predominantly did a lot of movements with the head to one side and then to the other side, to this going from one side to the other. As a learner, is one strategy, does it suit you better, or do you learn more from it? And return to being on your knees and having your hands in a push-ups position. And the right side of your face is on the floor. And again, take some time to sense where your knees are going to be, the placement of your knees and the placement of your hands and the placement of your head. And then begin to make circles around your cheek. And as you make circles, again, the circle's going around your face, but see how much of your body is involved in the circling. So can you feel how you're shifting pressure in a little circular action around both of your knees? And if I'm thinking of your base of support, also of your two hands, how there's a circle circling around the palms, how the pelvis is circling. And you might even sense how your elbows are circling in the air. And then when you've circled a few times in one direction, then change the direction and circle the other way. And can you even feel your chest and your shoulder blades, how they're involved in the circling? And then find a way to give it up and find a position that you can refresh and reflect in. And as you're doing that, you could even think, of how you could come back in a while and have the left side of the cheek on the floor and do that same movement. And how in this sort of lesson, there's different, it's nice watching people, how they've got the quality of the movement, they're paying attention to how much they're doing. And then come back onto your knees with your arms in a push-ups position and the left side of your face on the floor. And think of all those things that you've learned already in the two lessons, and then begin to do that circling action around the left side of your face. And how can you keep it light? And remember, the circle can be, you can choose whatever size you want to do the circle. You can make a bigger circle so that it goes around the perimeter of your face, or you could make a smaller circle. But feel as you're circling again, how it's not only the head that circles, but spread your attention to feel how many other parts of you are circling. And how you're shifting the weight as you circle on your knees and on your hands. And then change the direction of the circle. And feel, that area between your shoulder blades and the shoulders. And then line your backs. I was thinking, we're doing a lot of work in a strange orientation and how you can track everything in such an unfamiliar position. And I remembered when even before I finished the training, I had the opportunity to work with a stuntman. And he was just incredible of knowing where he was in space. And I worked with him with a colleague of mine who you might have heard with, Cliff Smythe. And we basically did tag Feldenkrais, which was that we'd, talk about the lesson and one of us would start off. And when we'd get stuck, the other person would take over. And, we're very fortunate that this guy was very open to what we were doing. But what happened to him and how he injured himself was that he had to jump off a building. I forget how many stories. And unfortunately, he just missed the crash pad by a little bit and had these awful fractures in his foot. But what astounded me was that he had he said, when I'm falling, I know exactly where I am in space. And that's, over a long height. And I think because of that spatial awareness and of knowing his orientation in that process of falling, he was just so easy to work with. Okay. So now come back up and you're going to have your right ear on the floor. So start off again with your arms in a push-ups position and the right ear on the floor. And with your head in that position, just start again to move your head, like to translate it left and right, and feel the ease now of moving. So it's not particularly now rolling the head, but you're just shifting the head a little bit to the left and to the right. And again, you can do that movement and gradually discover for yourself where your head is going to rest most comfortably for the next part, which is of slipping the right arm underneath you towards the left. And just take the arm across to the left and back out a variety of times. And, you might want to play with where you've got your head placed as you do that, or if the arm leads your head into a certain place. And then explore as you do it of how you could move the head through that gap created as your arm reaches to the left. So again, I'm saying through the gap, but that's really only a direction in terms of trajectory. It doesn't mean you've got to get your head through the gap, but you're just moving it toward the gap. And then find a place that's comfortable for both your arm and your head. And then start to straighten your leg. So then you're going to start to straighten your left leg. And again, so you're going to have your left foot, the toes are down, and you're just going to start to push through the toes and bring the knee into the air. So you're on your toes of the left foot, and you're just pushing through the toes and letting the knee come into the air and feeling that transmission from the toes up through the left hip to your right shoulder, and finding where can you place your head. So you want to have your, now it's an odd position, but if you think it's a roll, so the head, the back of the head can come to the floor more. You can start looking up towards the ceiling. And again, you can explore a little bit how you bring the right knee into the air. Oh, sorry, left knee. And so, there's a real sort of organization that has to happen in the back and a placement of the head that I think as we go through the lessons will become clearer and easier. So then leave it and take a rest. And I think the nicest thing that I thought of going through this series was, that thing of really using it as learning, of not really thinking that did it matter if my shoulder came fully to the floor or if I could bring the back of my head to the floor and look toward the ceiling. But how could I have the curiosity to explore the different placement of my head or my knees and arms and spread my attention, a bit like a movement puzzle maybe. How could I, be curious and playful and see what I came up with? And if I didn't, get there, it didn't really matter because I knew that I was learning a lot on the way. And in Aikido, we have, it's interesting, the use of attention in Aikido and in Feldenkrais is sort of same but different. But in Aikido, we do a very maybe systematic way of, organizing our attention as we move from our center and reach out with our arms. And what the idea is that we work with resistance of a partner. And the partner gives us that opportunity of giving us feedback that if we start forcing or efforting or get stuck, that we're not processing and using our bodies in the optimal way. So then we stop and we reset. And in this lesson, I guess it gives you that same opportunity to, make those little adjustments and sense as you go along how changes are occurring and how things are organizing themselves. So return to coming onto your knees once more. And this time I think we're up to having the left ear on the floor. And your arms are in a push-ups position. And you're going to bring the left arm now underneath you toward the right side. So just feel how the left arm can slide underneath. And as the left arm slides underneath, sense, now just bring the arm in and out a few times and sense that connection between the arm and the head, and how the head doesn't need to stay in the midline, but it can move to this, can move left or right. And your head's sort of heading with that idea of the gap created by the arm in a push-ups position. And then you're going to start to straighten the right knee, pushing through the right foot, and feeling the shift of weight to the left shoulder. So feeling what happens in the right hip and how that shifts to the left shoulder. And having that idea of, being able to look up toward the ceiling. And you can do a little bit and pause and come back to it, or take a longer rest. And I'm just going to leave it to you how much you explore this movement, because I know some of you, well, for everyone it's different how much they want to do. So when you've done it to your satisfaction, just roll over onto your backs. And as you're now lying on your back, just use the opportunity to sense how the movements are affecting what's happening across your shoulder blades. And elsewhere. And even just roll your head a little bit left and right and notice how the freedom of the movement is in your head. And then return, this time to have your right ear on the floor and your arms in a push-ups position. And bring your right arm underneath you towards the left. And even do that a few times of just bringing the arm in and out and feeling how that affects the location of your head and that connection between the arm and the head. And the other arm, if it's comfortable, is still in a push-ups position. And then leave the arm underneath your body and start to have your left foot in a running position so that you're on your toes, and then return to pushing through the foot and straightening the left knee. And then as you do that, similar like what you did in the previous lesson, you're going to bring, so I'm just getting my sides right, the left arm up toward the ceiling and back down. And just do that a few times and feel how the left arm can come up toward the ceiling. And again, it doesn't need to be vertical, so think it's not the arm that's underneath you, it's the other arm that's coming up toward the ceiling. So the arm that was in more of a push-ups position is coming up toward the ceiling. And you're feeling where could you imagine leaving that left arm up toward the ceiling. And then when you have your left arm up toward the ceiling, begin slowly to make a small circle. So think of your arms. It's also a funny pattern because, you know, it's a bit of a pretzel position. So the arm that's up towards the ceiling is the arm that's in a push-ups position. So one arm's on the floor, the right arm's underneath you, and the left arm's up towards the ceiling. And you're just starting to circle the hand. Now, are you just circling the arm, or are you thinking and extending your attention to think, how can you shift weight as you circle? You know, can you get your pelvis involved in the movement? Can you push through the foot? Can your chest and your shoulder blades be involved? Because if you're just going to do it from the arm, it's going to really restrict the size of the circle. But also, you know, you're not using the rest of yourself to help with this weird movement. And so, you know, as you're moving, feel how that circling of the arm shifts your weight on the shoulder that's resting on the floor. And how your head has to make a little circle as well. And for those, and maybe leave it and we'll come back to it and change the direction of the circle later, but come out of the position and take a rest. And then return to the same position. And this time you're going to, you know, find a way to bring the same arm up into the air and continuing the circling, but really think of where in your body, now how can you shift your weight? How can you make the circling movement light? And how could you change the direction of the circle that you were doing? So that the circling's not only in the arm, but you know, you might even feel that there's a little circling as you're pushing through the foot, that there's a circle happening around your foot or in the hip. And how the weight's shifting in a circle over that shoulder that's on the floor. And there's a lot of movement happening in the upper back. And then take a rest on your backs. And just spend time whilst you pause from that odd position to think through how you would do it with the left side of your face on the floor. And as you imagine doing that movement, how much of yourself are you including in the image? And so coming to the same position with your left ear on the floor, the left arm through to the right. And start to straighten. Have your right foot in that ready for running position and start straightening the right leg. And when you've done that a few times, feel how you can bring the right arm up into the air. And how when you've done that, you can start to circle the arm. And think of playing with the size of the circle. So, and is it possible to explore the movement of making the circle larger and using that circular action sort of to shift you more over the shoulder? And how do you stay balanced in this weird and wonderful configuration? And can you have a sense of, all those things that we've been talking about, how you're shifting weight from the foot upward and the force is transmitting on the diagonal, how your head can circle with the arm and the shoulders, and then change direction of the circle. And so does your attention get caught in the circle movement of the arm, or can you spread it to include your pelvis and your leg? Because really, your circling action is going to be, I was going to say, more integrated or fuller movement if you can involve more of yourself in the movement. And then leave it and take a rest. And then come back up onto your knees, and this time place your right ear on the floor and your right arm through to the left. And is that position becoming more familiar to you? And straighten your left knee and push through it as you were before. And bring your left arm sort of away from the floor toward the ceiling, but on diagonal to your left leg. And then push through, continue to push through the left foot and sense that connection to the arm. And just go backwards and forwards a few times, allowing the knee to bend and then pushing through again. And just do a few movements and then change sides and do the same thing to the other side. And then leave it. And just line your backs as a transition place. So that you're going to line your backs to transition up to standing. And as you're on your back, roll your head from side to side and feel how that is now. And just allow your eyes to move in the same direction as your head. And then do a few movements of rolling your head from side to side, but move the eyes in the opposite direction. And then go back to letting the eyes and the head move together. And then allow the head to come to rest to rest. And then in your own way, just slowly come up to standing. And again, thinking it's the end of the lesson and the end of the day. So how can you how do you transition up to standing? What's the qualities that you want to take with you? And feel how it is standing and how integrated you feel when you stand. So I was looking at the board of what you did earlier on in the day about integration. And so as you start to walk around the room, I'm just going to read out some of those points and you can sense if they're applying to you at this moment. So start to walk around the room and feel how you're walking. And just notice if, are there more parts of yourself included in your image? And is there a congruency of your action? And how can you take your intention of walking? How does that intention, you've changed positions after the lesson. How can you start to have the intention of walking and noticing so that you're taking your intention into action? And what's your movement and adaptability across the ground? And as you walk, just sense how you're breathing, and if that's changed your breath as you're now walking, has it adapted? And the connection of your pelvis and head. And if you feel like as you're walking, start to be more inclusive of your attention. So take your attention not only within yourself, but start spreading your attention to involve more people in the room, to involve the space. And start having the intention from all this observing of how it's time to go home and how you can start organizing that intention to do so. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And Sylvia's got an announcement.